You know how to hold it all together, but when it comes to your relationships, something's always missing. Welcome to Emotionally Wealthy, a podcast for high achievers who are ready to trade emotional disconnection for clarity, fulfillment, and relationships that are nourishing, not draining. I'm your host, Karen Conlon, licensed therapist, transformational coach, and your guide in turning insight into action. Are you ready for it? Let's do this. Welcome, everyone, once again to another episode of the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. I'm Karen Conlon, and oh man, I'm so excited to have my guest on today because this is a topic that is rarely spoken about, but very much impacts our healthcare indirectly. I'm joined today by Dr. Lisa Muehlenbein. Lisa is a health psychologist and a leading voice on physician burnout, as well as its ripple effect on medical families. Now, Lisa isn't just someone who studies from a distance. She has nearly 3 decades of lived experience as a medical spouse herself, alongside over 30 years in the health and wellness field. Lisa is the author of Physician Burnout and the Marital Relationship, Spouse Perspective, Wellness Beyond the White Coat, and the Burnout Risk Assessment Quiz for physicians and their spouses. She's also the founder of the MedLife Matrix methodology, which supports physicians, spouses, and healthcare organizations all around in navigating burnout in a way that's more intentional and conscious. Last but not least, she is also the host of an amazing podcast called the MedLife Support Podcast. Today's conversation, everyone, will be about the unseen emotional labor of physician spouses, the identity shifts. We're going to talk about how love, pride, resentment, loyalty, and grief can all coexist in one place. And we're also going to talk about what it looks like to move from surviving a medical career together to building something in a more conscientious and connected way. Lisa, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk about this topic that is so near and dear to me.
Thanks for having me, Karen. I'm excited to be here as well.
I would love to start with asking you a little bit about who you were before you became the voice that you are today. When you look back at your life, at your
Mhm.
childhood, at your environment, what were some of the early messages that you learned or maybe absorbed about responsibility, partnership, achievement, any of those messages that shaped how you showed up in relationships later on?
Wow, that's a really great question. And I don't know that anyone's asked me that one yet. So, um, well, um, I was a teen mom and I had my oldest son between my junior and senior year in high school.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about responsibility at that point and who I was and who I wanted to be and who I didn't want to be and how I wanted my life to go. And
Yeah.
through very, you know, maybe expected or unexpected series of events, my son's father and I got married right after I graduated high school. And a year later, there were a lot of heavy things happening in our lives, not just the heaviness of being a teen mom and having a child at that age, but also getting married and having those responsibilities at 18 years old. And I started college the first time right after I graduated. And at that time, my father had cancer.
Mm.
And during my wedding, he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't walk me down the aisle because his illness had progressed that far. And that was in the summer. Then in October, we lost him. And
Mm.
that was really hard. So we were dealing with a lot of heavy things. And when I got pregnant and when I talked to my parents about it, one thing that they said was, you will finish high school, you will graduate, and you will go to college. I
Wow.
distinctly remember those words. So that stuck with me and essentially really led to where I am right now with this PhD in health psychology and studying physician families, though there was a lot of things in between, but that was really something that stuck with me. So it's a long time later that that stuck with me. My husband now, who is not the father of my eldest, we didn't meet until probably about 5 years later after I had gotten divorced and moved and was living
Yeah.
in a different state. And he and I met when I had gone back to school, not back to school for college, but I was in an x-ray tech program and at one of the hospitals where we lived at the time in Ohio. And he was in his second year of residency in
Yeah.
radiology. And that's where we met. And at the time, my son was 5
Yeah.
and I'd been divorced several years. And when we met, he was already a doctor and he was practicing in his residency. So I met him and he was already still in training, but he was already a doctor.
Did you have an idea of what to expect?
Oh gosh, no. I knew a little bit because I was in the hospital with him and he was in his second year of a 4-year residency. And my schooling that I was doing was a 2-year program, but we started dating at the beginning of my second year. And my program administrators did not like that. And so they found a lame excuse to get rid of me. So I got kicked
Uh,
out. And
hmm.
I took those credits that I had from the first time I was in college and I transferred them and I went back to school and was working on my bachelor's degree in exercise science. When we were getting married, he took a job in my hometown and I didn't want to leave any loose ends. So back in the 90s, we had a paper course catalog. I opened it up and looked and said, what can
I
I finish in the
remember.
time
I
I have
remember.
left?
I remember
Yes.
those. I just got
Yes.
some
Right.
flashbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, what can I finish in the time I had left? And I had enough credits to finish an early childhood education degree. It was an associate degree. I had no intention of teaching preschool. I just wanted to finish something. So thinking back to what my parents had said, you will go to college, you will finish, you will get a degree. Well, I knew they didn't mean an associate degree, but I felt like I felt that pressure to finish something.
Yeah.
My husband knew that I had always wanted to go back and finish my bachelor's degree, though I didn't go back and do it until 2020.
Yeah.
But circling back to, did I know what I was getting into? I thought I did because I saw the long hours that he worked. I saw the pressure and the heaviness of some of the things that he was experiencing as a resident, but yet not fully. I didn't understand completely what I was getting into. It was like I understood surface level, but I
Yeah.
didn't understand the deeper layers. But that was coming.
Yeah. And so getting to that actually,
Mhm.
so for those people out there listening who are saying to themselves, "Oh yeah, I didn't expect it either." Right?
Mhm.
What did that start to look like? When did you start realizing that what you saw
Mhm.
at work and said, "Oh yes, the hours are tough," all of these things that I'm sure I know what I'm getting into. When did you start to notice that it was a lot heavier, maybe, than what you expected for you personally?
Well, I mean, immediately, but in different ways. So some of the experiences that I had were compounded over time. I I knew that he was going to be on call. I knew certain things, so I expected them. But what I didn't think about was, we got pregnant on our honeymoon. My second son was on the way,
Yeah.
and we were living in my hometown, which was a rural town in Pennsylvania. And there were 3 people in the practice, and one was on vacation when I went into labor. So there were 2 of them left at work, but what I found was, like, I'm in labor and my husband's like, Let me just run downstairs and make sure that everything's under control." And after I had the baby, he was going down to the radiology department and reading some x-rays and doing some things after I literally just had a baby. And so the idea of, hmm, I never thought of my husband potentially missing the delivery of our child.
Yeah.
And thankfully he didn't. And he didn't any of the other 2 that came after that either. But it was close, and a lot of planning had to go into that, making sure that he requested vacation and that I had an OBGYN that would induce me specifically during that week, because otherwise there was no guarantee that he was going to even be able to be there.
Yeah.
And I've talked to many other spouses who the physician missed it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's a huge life experience for the mom to go through and be like, "Hey, my my
Yeah.
person is not here." And for the physician to go, "Oh, like I missed the birth of my child." That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And the nights on call, and the missing date night, missing birthdays, missing, you know, holidays. There were many holidays where I was alone because my oldest son was having um, a holiday with his dad. And so it wasn't my holiday to have. And my husband was on call. So he was in the hospital and we were away from family. And, there were holidays where I was by myself,
Yeah.
and that was tough.
I'm hearing a lot of planning right from the
Yes.
beginning. And so I
Mm-hmm.
can just imagine that there's so much managing of logistics and emotions
Mm-hmm.
to keep the household stable. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're quite literally juggling all the time,
Mm-hmm.
emotions and logistics, emotions
Yeah.
and practicality. And I'm curious for you, Lisa, what does that do to someone's internal world when you're constantly having to vacillate from one place to another? I can't imagine that there was that much space for you to have your emotions kind of at play or available to you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was that experience like for you internally?
Well, I understand it a lot better now
Yeah.
over time and experience, and of course with my research. But back then, there was a gamut of emotions. There was the, "Oh, I'm really proud of my husband
Yeah.
and the work that he's doing," because at that time we were in a small town, and it was my hometown, so I knew a lot of people there. And when people would say, "Oh, your husband did this for me," or "You did that for me and took care of my grandma," or,
Yeah.
family member, there is that pride in their service.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there is resentment because, they're not having a holiday with you. They are having a holiday with someone else's family. And, it's not a holiday celebration typically if that family member's in the hospital, but, you know, it it's a it's a wide array of emotions that are in opposite ends of the spectrum that happen simultaneously at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm thinking about, I'm kind of envisioning you going to the store and somebody saying, "Oh, your husband did this and that," and you feeling the sense of pride.
Mhm.
And at the same time, also maybe even privately carrying resentment or guilt or maybe loneliness or maybe a
Sure.
combination of those things,
Yep.
and like really complicated emotions
Yeah.
coexisting, right?
Yes, and for both of us, truly, because at
Yeah.
that point, he's getting up early and he's going to work before young children are awake
Yeah.
and coming home after maybe they have already gone to bed or um, missing birthday parties, having to leave because he got paged, or we've held holiday celebrations and birthdays and on non-holiday days. we
Yeah.
we essentially rescheduled these things because that is what MedLife required in order for us all to be together, which is
Yeah.
really hard to not celebrate Christmas on Christmas when you have little kids.
You just added another layer here that
Mhm.
we haven't even begun to discuss, which is okay, so I'm an adult
Mhm.
and I can intellectualize it, I can rationalize it. I can even say, you know what? We're flexible. This is
Mhm.
a strength, right? This is a
Yeah.
strength in our relationship. The fact that we can shift things and celebrate this on the other day. It might be a little disappointing, but we're doing it. We're making the effort.
Right. Right.
But then there's the kiddos.
Yeah.
Then there's having to explain it to them where they're not at a developmental stage
Mhm.
emotionally to be able to fully comprehend.
Mhm.
Right. And so
Yeah.
did you find that did you have to have those conversations with them?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm thinking back to school performances,
Yeah.
sporting events where I was the only one there. And w- fast forward, we moved to South Carolina and now we've got all four kids and I've
Wow.
got sporting events, parent teacher conferences, school trips that I'm the only one going to.
Yeah.
And the older kids understood that this is dad's work and this is what dad does, and dad is taking care of people. Back then, our youngest was 7 years younger than, our number three. We were living in South Carolina. We didn't have any family close by. And there were many times where I would attend her performances and attend her um, shows or field trips by myself. But the thing that really sticks out to me is when they had donuts with dad.
Mm,
I was able to go to muffins with mom, but I also was the parent that attended donuts with dad.
yeah.
And I remember having, a stick on felt mustache and a paper tie with a little elastic string
Oh, Lisa.
that eh, that I wore because my husband couldn't get off to come to this. And his hospital, ironically, was literally right across the street. But he didn't have coverage. He couldn't step away for an hour for this event.
Yeah.
And so, seeing disappointment on her face, seeing happiness that I was there, but disappointment that dad could never come to that event, that was sad. I think,
Yeah.
but for all of us, it was sad for her, it was sad for me, and it was sad for my husband that he couldn't be there.
Yeah.
But that job just wasn't set up for him to be able to step away for that. And for many physicians, that is the case.
Yeah.
They are forced to see patient after patient after patient, more patients in less time.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
based on what type of practice they have and how insurance dictates how you get paid, it's like a herding cattle, you're just like one after the other. And I hate that it's that way. And most physicians hate that it's that way too. And
Yeah.
the patient hates that it's that way too. So it's tough for all of us.
The medical system and the way it's set up is something that I definitely want to touch on in a little bit because I think many people don't understand the way that the medical system is set up and how overall how it impacts their own emotional and psychological and mental health as well. It's
Mhm.
not something that we typically think about. But coming back to you, first of all, when you just saying that story, my heart just like
Mm.
warmed up, and I was like, ah, just imagining you there, what it must be like for your kiddo to see you show up, but then also at the same time having these other feelings. And again, this brings me to what we were saying before, these coexisting feelings. It's not just
Mhm.
now the physician's spouse, like we're saying. Now you're bringing in this other layer
Mhm.
of these conflicting coexisting feelings that children might be experiencing too. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because
Mhm.
that is something that um a lot of times, we're keeping the kids busy, we're doing this, we're doing that, but we're not really asking or addressing it because we are so busy being competent. And
Mhm.
it sounds to me, Lisa, like being competent actually, to a certain degree, becomes a survival strategy
Yes.
in this way and in this role that you're holding up.
Absolutely. It requires you to be very independent.
Yeah.
And it can be very easy to slip into a blame mode, for blaming the physician for not being there and blaming them for you having to carry the domestic load and for blaming them for, having a child who's disappointed.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to slip into that. And I mean, I am by no means perfect and I have definitely been there, but it's very easy to do that. So for spouses, you have to learn to be independent. You have to learn to occupy your own time, find your own hobbies, create your own life, essentially, one that they fit in when they're there and one that allows you to live when they're not there. Because if you're just sitting at home waiting for them to come home, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Really. But, we find things that we all like to do together and around town. So you come up with these things. And for me, one of the things that was huge was joining a mom's group. I
Yeah.
joined two different moms groups and I met people who some were in the medical families and some were not. But these people that I met who had kids the same age or so, I still keep in touch with some of those people.
Yeah.
We don't live near each other anymore, but we ended up traveling together. Our kids grew up together. And these were people who saw me through some of, life's really challenging moments.
Yeah.
And that's really what you have to do. You have to put yourself out there. You have to create a community.
Yes. And it sounds like you did that through through finding friendships and connections in your community with other moms.
Mhm.
Did you find, Lisa, that this emotional labor, all of this was just in MedLife, or did you, through these connections and these friendships, find that it, can happen across other fields? Did you
Mm.
meet other people that had, in different professions, but also maybe the same type of dynamic where you had one spouse who was out working, long hours, and then
Mhm.
that same type of situation that you had going?
So, yes and no.
Mm,
I think some of the factors that would happen in any marriage were experienced by both. But there were the things, talking about the long hours, the call, the unpredictable schedule, a lot of that is unique to MedLife. There are certain things like a lot of people in medicine end up moving multiple times because that is what medicine demands,
right.
from medical school, residency, fellowship, first job. Most people move quickly after their first job. They don't usually stay there more than a couple years. So the frequent relocation is something that happens in military families. And so there's that commonality there in having to be independent. But the difference is the military has that built in. If you're living on base, they have organizations, they have
Yeah.
groups, they have a lot of support. Medical families don't have that. Some counties and some states have medical alliances, which are, if you think of like a medical society for physicians, this is the
Right.
counterpart for spouses and partners. And there is a national organization, the American Medical Association Alliance, that applies to the whole country. But not every county and not every state has that. So it's very interesting to see what was the same between families and what wasn't. And, many families could expect that the dad was going to be home at 5:15 because they worked till 5 o'clock. And when they're done, at
Yeah.
5, they're done. It's a clock punch thing. But if your spouse happens to be an OBGYN, for example, they might be delivering a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if they're a surgeon, the surgery might go long. So there are just things that are unique to MedLife that people just don't understand unless they're living it. And it's not oh, poor me.
Hmm.
It's that this is the reality and
Right.
that the person who you chose to spend your life with, a lot of times you're not spending life with them
Yeah.
and you're doing it on your own. You feel like a single parent.
Yeah. That's a really uh, great and clear way of phrasing that, like just
Hmm.
very clear picture of what that can feel like
Hmm.
sometimes. And I also really appreciate the comparison that you've made between, let's say, a military life and the med life,
Hmm.
because that is so true. When you have a setup in that way, you're right. Like you can move from community to community, but you almost have already this built-in support group because you know that you can move from one community to another, and then you can meet other spouses that
Hmm.
will automatically commiserate and understand. You don't
Hmm.
have to explain it. You don't have to start over. Whereas
Right.
in your situation, you're constantly needing to start over
Hmm.
every time that you move. And I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about that. It's true
Hmm.
that we don't often think about the medical field being one that moves around a lot, but there is actually a lot of movement when you're
Hmm.
starting from when you're being matched, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've been together almost 30 years. We've moved through 4 states, and some of the moves within those states have been right down the street, but together we've moved 11 times.
oh my gosh,
But when you think of 4 states, there were 4 very different states, and culture is very different, from, a northeastern state to a southern state.
yeah,
And now I live in Florida, which is very unique in its own.
right,
But, you made a huge point where you're talking about having to explain yourself, or rather not having to explain yourself. And that is huge for medical families, to be able to have a community that understands what it's like. So when you have friends that are also in medicine, you don't have to explain why you're by yourself. You don't have to explain what call is like. You don't have to explain, the frustration in your child's face because your spouse wasn't able to be at their, fourth grade graduation, or, you know,
yeah,
um, kindergarten moving up day, those kind of things.
yeah.
And you don't have to explain that because people who are in medicine, they understand. They understand what that's like. You don't have to explain it.
What about family? Because we're talking about support with community, friends, right? New relationships, other physician spouses. I'm curious about family. I'm curious about the experience that physician spouses have with receiving understanding, that same level of understanding or support from family members. I get the impression that generally speaking, people think, hey, you're married to a doctor and life is good. Maybe you have maybe as the pay grade gets better, you have a nicer house or nicer neighborhood, all the things, right? So there's this image that we have, um, and that I think that other people have about what your life is alike and what it's about. And I'm curious to know not just about you, but also in terms of family support, those people closest to you, do they get it? Do they
Mm.
always understand?
Oh, that's a great question, Karen. And it's one that actually has a lot of layers to unpack.
Sure. Yeah.
So in general, many physician families don't live in areas where their families are because they
Right.
have matched for medical school or residency or fellowship across the country. And my husband's family is from Minnesota, but he matched with his residency in Ohio. And, that's tough because you're not anywhere near your family.
Yeah.
And that is extremely hard because not only do you not have that family support, but you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And so that was really challenging because the families, they don't quite understand. And, there can be some judgment there.
Yeah.
Um, when people I talked to, when I was conducting my research study, they're like, my family doesn't understand. They think that he's deliberately trying to be away from us and not spend the holiday together. But yet at the same time, there's
Yeah.
also oh, well, at least you're married to a doctor and you must be rich. And, there are a lot of perks to it, but there these veiled compliments, or shall I say, these compliments that are really veiled criticisms.
Yeah.
And, people don't see the $400,000 in medical school debt that you have.
Yeah.
And so when you get your first job, you get a good paycheck, compared to a resident salary, but it doesn't touch
Yeah.
the medical school debt. So there's a lot of varying degrees of being misunderstood.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally see that. I'm so glad that you elaborated and explained a little bit more about the invisible, that invisible side of the image that
Yeah.
people see, or the perceptions or
Mhm.
the assumptions that people make
Mhm.
about either the doctor or the doctor's life or the doctor's wife or her husband or whatever, or their children. I think that point is going to touch so many people because it is really speaking to the things that are not so tangible
Mhm.
but that are so very much present and cause stress and are the things that are top of mind many
Right.
times
Mhm.
when you are in MedLife. And
Mhm.
so, in terms of you, you did some amazing research that I'd love to talk about.
Mhm.
But before you got there,
Mhm.
because you've been busy, right? I'm hearing a
Yeah.
lot of busy, right? You're busy with the kids,
Yes.
you're busy with moving, you're busy with
Mhm.
coordinating. I mean, there's just so many things that are coming to mind. It's overwhelming.
There's a lot of invisible labor, like you mentioned earlier, the invisible labor that goes into that, the coordinating the move, coordinating, if you have packers or if you're doing it yourself and making sure you have all the boxes and that you have all the paper and you have all the tape and the markers and you have all the things and you're getting all of the kids' school documents from the school that they're leaving and you've made all the arrangements for the school that they're going to. But before you can do that, you have to research the schools and you have to make sure that where you're moving to is in the same area as the school district that you want to be in. So then you have to find the right place to live. There's just so many different steps that qualify as invisible labor.
Yeah.
And these are the things, it's this checklist of one thing after another that people just don't think about. And, many times that we moved, I either had an infant or I was pregnant or both. And that's a lot of stuff to manage. And then you got to make sure you got everyone's things and that you know, when you're packing a truck and you're moving across the country, all your stuff's going before you are.
Uh,
And so then you got to make sure, oh, do I have everything everyone needs in the time that we're still going to be here? It's just a lot to juggle. It's
yeah.
a lot to juggle.
Yeah. It's like it's as if you are the senior project manager and also the project manager team member.
Yeah.
You're doing both. You're doing both roles, right? You went back to school. You've got your
Hmm.
PhD. Um, what happened in between? Were
In
you?
between.
Yeah, I mean, because you're doing all
Yeah.
these things, and I can imagine that you're maybe on some level saying to yourself, "Oh, well, I this isn't everything that I want. Maybe, right? I'd
Yeah.
like something else." What did that narrative sound like for you?
Absolutely. So when my number three, my oldest daughter, when she was a baby, and she and my second child, my second son, were 14 months apart. And I just remember after her, I believe that I never had a formal diagnosis because, I didn't talk to anybody about it,
Mm,
but I believe that I was experiencing postpartum depression after I had her.
hmm.
And I felt like I just had there was so much going on, and that I told my husband, I said, I need to get out of the house before I pull my hair out.
Yeah.
Like, I need to get out. And so that's when I started doing yoga. And then I went on to start teaching yoga. I taught yoga for the next 24 years.
Wow.
And when we lived in South Carolina, I had a studio for 8 years. And then we closed it in 2018. We moved down here to Florida in 2019.
Okay.
But when COVID happened, the studios I was at closed. And this was the opportunity for me to go back to school.
Wow.
This is when it came, because I had looked at going back many, many times, but the stars just didn't align. The kids were young. They had stuff going on. I had a business I was running. But when we moved here, there's a college that's right off the highway, and I saw it and I reached out to them to find out. Because at that point, my oldest three were technically adults. So my number three, my daughter, she was getting ready to go to college in 2019. And my youngest was in middle school. But then I thought, oh, I'm just going to get her moved to college. I'm going to get my youngest settled. It's fine. So I pushed the pause button once again. And I got a phone call in May from the college, from the university here that I had reached out to. And they said, hey, just wanted to let you know our next session is starting in 2 weeks if you're interested. So I said to my
Wow.
husband, I was like, I mean, I'm not doing anything else and the world is shut down. And we, we were like, if not now, when? So I went back to school, and I had so many credits from the
Yeah.
first two times, and I finished my bachelor's degree in health and wellness in a year. So now we're 2021 and it's still COVID. It was very much still COVID.
Yes.
And so I kept going, and I worked my way through my master's and worked my way into my PhD in psychology with a specialization in health psychology. I wanted to do something relating to physician burnout because I was seeing what was happening in the medical community. And at that time in 2021, the rate of physician burnout was 68.2%, according to the American Medical Association. So when you have nearly two-thirds of your
Wow.
workforce experiencing burnout, that's a problem. Now, we do know that COVID contributed to that. We get it, but that's a lot.
Yeah.
So my dissertation chair, she said, well, it's a shame you can't interview spouses to find out what's going on with the spouses. And I was like, well, actually, I can, because I had become a member of several spouse organizations on the county, state, and national level. So I had access to spouses of physicians. So that's where my research began. I interviewed female spouses of male physicians who were
Hmm.
practicing for the last 5 years, because I wanted to know what was happening pre, during, and post COVID. And I went with female spouses of male physicians simply because A, that was the majority of who I had access to,
Right.
so proximity, but also because at that time, and still currently, when we look at practicing physicians, that is still the largest pool that we have
Hmm.
currently. The female physicians are making
Hmm.
ground. So I'm excited to see that. And hopefully I'm excited to do some work with them and dual physician households, as well as LGBTQ
Yeah.
physicians in the future, because all of three of those demographics have different unique circumstances from the traditional male physician, female spouse um,
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
And they deserve their own studies. So if
Yeah.
I'm lucky in the future, I'll be a part of those. So that's
Oh,
how we got here.
I don't have any doubt that that's going to happen. I mean, you are a person of resolve and a person who ultimately understands herself. It's gotten you through many difficult ups and downs in
Mhm.
times in your life, but it's also there's a resolve to you that I see, and I saw it from the first time that I met you, and it's this very grounded resolve. It's a quiet
Mm,
resolve. It's not a loud resolve. It's a resolve that
mm,
you know inside what needs to happen. And I feel very fortunate and lucky that you're sharing that with us today, because I feel like
mm,
so many people are going to learn from it. With regards to your study, what are some of the main things that came out of that study
mhm,
that you did with the physician spouses?
Well, first, thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate that. So 10 main themes emerged from my study. So I did a qualitative study where I'm interviewing these spouses. And I really appreciated that time with them because I could then ask them follow-up questions and dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
So during the interview process, 10 themes emerged. And, we don't have time to talk about all of them here today, but some of the main points were sacrifice and loss. That
Mm,
feeling of I gave up my job, my career, I moved away from my family so that you could follow yours. There is that sacrifice and loss that came up. There is the loneliness, the feeling like, I'm married, but we really feel like roommates with rings because I never get to see you.
yeah.
So, and that relocation that happens often where you don't know anybody and that loneliness is huge. Then there's also the feeling like a single parent. There's the solo parenting, the attending everything by yourself, the going to all of the school functions by yourself, birthday parties, events, rescheduling anniversary dinners, all of those things, that feeling like a single parent. And
Yeah.
then there's lack of self-care. There is I don't have time to take care of myself because I'm taking care of everybody else. So that a lot of the concept of put your own oxygen mask on first so that you can assist other people, that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Then, and we have anger, anger at being, at the system, a
Hmm.
system that doesn't support families. They don't support the idea of the physician family, which is truly the foundational support for physicians when they are experiencing burnout.
Yeah.
So there's anger there. There's anger when they see the system mistreating the physician.
Yes.
And then we talked earlier about feeling misunderstood. Oh, you're married to a doctor and you must be rich, and, all of those other things that people just don't understand unless they're in it. And
Yeah.
then, and then there's the relationship issues, the me versus you when it should be us versus the problem. This burnout issue impacts the relationships. And then, of course, there's the pride in his service or pride in their service that I mentioned earlier. The feeling of, I'm so proud of my spouse and the work that they're doing, but yet I do have all these other feelings. And these feelings are on opposite ends of the spectrum, but yet they can exist at the same time. So that's the bulk of the work that I did and the themes that came out. And the spouses that talked with me, I'm forever grateful for because
Yeah.
they really shaped the trajectory of my future and the work that I'm doing now.
Oh, just amazing work. I I feel that all of this information, all of the outcome that you had from your research speaks to a couple of big themes that came up for me. Number one
Hmm.
is that burnout specifically rarely stays confined to the workplace.
Mm-mm. Nope.
At the top of the hour when we started, one of the things that I mentioned in your intro was that, burnout, let's say my physician's burnout, or the physician's spouse's burnout, how could it impact me as the patient? Right. And it's a trickle down effect. And so I feel like your research really can show how this trickle down effect can actually happen and ultimately impact the patient that is in the office. The other thing too that then came up is the whole idea around the medical uh, culture, just normalizing overworking and postponement of self-care and all these other things. And I'm curious from you and the research that you did here, what's the bigger impact?
Yeah. So I'll start with what you mentioned about it not staying at the hospital because
Yes.
it doesn't. And what happens is burnout does not just walk up to your house and ring the doorbell and say, hello, I'm here. Hi,
Yeah.
it's me. I'm the problem. It doesn't work like that. But rather, what happens is it begins as this slow erosion. You start with a little trickle after a rainstorm, and the next thing you know, you have a Grand Canyon in your
Yeah.
backyard.
Yeah.
And so when we look at physician burnout as a whole,
Yeah.
according to the American Medical Association, the organization is responsible for 80% of the factors that contribute to physician burnout. And the
80%.
physician, 80%. And the physician, as an individual, can only be responsible for 20% of those factors. Now, the physician is responsible for those 20%. So they really need to make the changes that they can. But
Mhm.
when you're looking at the organization being responsible for the vast majority of the issues that then impact the physician, creating burnout. When a physician is burned out, there is greater absenteeism, there's greater medical errors, there is greater tendency for an amplification of existing anxiety and depression and substance use. So, if
Yeah.
some of those factors are already there, burnout amplifies what is already existing.
Yeah.
So, then when you have all of those factors combined, you have increased medical errors, you have increased lawsuits. So that is where it carries over into the patient. But I'll come back to that in a minute. When you have these issues with the physician, and we know that the spouse or partner and family is the physician's greatest tool to combat burnout.
Right.
So
Right.
when it trickles down and impacts the relationship between the physician and their partner, we are eroding that foundation of support for the physician. So it's bidirectional. When the family is not supported, then the physician is not supported in the factors that they can control. Then, when the physician is not supported on the home front, and we have this dysregulation in the work life balance and the work life integration, then the organization is not supported. Now, when we have this issue, then physicians want to leave. If they are
Right.
in a culture, if they're in a culture where they are not happy and their spouse is not happy, they want out and they
Yeah.
start looking to leave. Well, when a physician leaves, an organization can expect it to cost them between $500,000 and $1 million. Yes, it's a crazy number. Yes,
500,000 and a million. Wait,
yes.
so I want to make sure that I understand this
Yeah.
because this is mind blowing right now. So
Mhm.
i- a physician leaves, let's say, are we
Mhm.
talking about a hospital setting? Are
Sure.
we
Yep.
okay?
Yep. Yeah.
So they are burnt out, and we know, right, like with insurance, the way this works, you have there's a quota. I don't know if people know that, but
Mhm.
physicians oftentimes have a quota that they need to meet
Mhm.
of patients that they number of patients they need to see.
Yeah.
Um, so they're doing all these things, maybe lacking sleep, burnout is setting
Mhm.
in. Burnout is now also spilling over into the home, and we're seeing the spill of that into the
Mhm.
marital relationship and the changes in the emotional tone at work, at home rather, which now is also impacting the physician back
Mhm.
again, right? Because this bounces back to them as well. So now they've got work, they've got home, and now we've got, the patient. All of
Mhm.
this, all of this is now compounding on each other, one thing on top of
Mhm.
each other. And they say, you know what? This isn't working. We're out. I'm leaving.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And then that translates into a potential half a million to $1 million.
Yes. And this is why organizations need to perk up and pay attention. Because what happens when a physician leaves, number one, they're not generating any additional revenue.
Yeah.
So the revenue that they were making for the hospital or organization is no longer coming in. So they're losing revenue that way. Now, yes, that is offset by some salary, but they're not generating revenue. And by the way, the money that is generated from the revenue that a physician is producing way outweighs their salary.
Oh, yeah, for
So
sure. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's just be clear there. But so they are not generating revenue for the organization. If there is a lawsuit involved because there's medical error and this physician leaves, you have lawsuits, legal fees, and when you have to bring in a new physician, there are recruiting costs, whether you hire a headhunter or whether you do it
Yeah.
yourself. Most places hire, a recruiter. So there's that cost. And then when you are deciding that you want to come and interview, you usually end up paying for that physician's flight if they're flying in, or their expenses if they're driving, their hotel, their accommodations, their spouse. I went on multiple interviews with my husband. Then you're wining them and you're dining them, you're taking them out to dinner. There's those expenses, right? So there are layers, and we haven't even gotten the new physician yet.
Yeah.
So now, oftentimes, there is a sign on bonus. So when you're bringing someone in to replace the physician that has left, you are now usually paying to bring that person in to interview, but you're also typically paying a sign on bonus. So there are a lot of factors that go
Yeah.
into when a physician leaves, this is what happens. But so when that happens, when you've got the issue of burnout, first of all, and it's affecting the hospital, it's also affecting the patient. Because think about it, when you are in especially a rural setting that is hard to find a physician and that physician leaves, there's often an entire community who may be without their provider.
Yeah. My goodness.
And so, there's that ripple effect that it's not just, oh, the physician left.
Yeah.
There is a community of people who've lost their doctor. And
It
they
is.
may have built a relationship that, that physician may have seen this patient and their family through cancer, through chemo, and then they leave.
Yeah.
That's really hard. And so that's emotionally difficult. But when you also think about what burnout does, and when you think about medical errors, that impacts the patient.
Yes.
That impacts the patient's family. And if that if there's any litigation involved in that, so we're working backwards again, if there's any litigation involved in that, it impacts the organization, but there's also an emotional weight on the physician because they're dealing with that and dealing with the idea of like, I messed up, and physicians, oh, they have the vision of I'm supposed to be perfect and I can't make a mistake. And so when that happens, that weighs on them. It weighs on their relationship with their spouse. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
There are many layers when a physician goes through a lawsuit. So th- there's just so much involved. It's like
Yeah.
so many facets.
Yeah. The word that's coming up for me is it's so destabilizing in so
Yeah,
many ways.
absolutely.
In so many ways.
Absolutely.
And as someone who has been on that receiving end as the patient of having
Hmm.
someone who, like my OBGYN leaving, what that is like also on the receiving end
Hmm.
as a patient to then say, well, wait a minute. Well, who's gonna refill this and who do I see now? And
Right.
and now my appointment, which was in 3 months, now maybe if I'm lucky, I can get something in 6 months.
Hmm.
And what if I don't like this person? Or it's so destabilizing. I've personally gone through having to switch physicians probably 3 times in my life
Hmm.
because of this reason, by the way.
Hmm.
And how do I know it? Not because they tell me, but because the staff tells me. I will ask,
Yeah.
what happened? Well, this company took over, and
Hmm.
now the expectations and da da da. So
Yeah.
so I've been privy to the reasons why, and all three times it has been because of the immense amount of pressure, expectation, and oftentimes just unrealistic high bar
Yeah.
that is set without any guardrails and
Mhm,
or any additional protections or help or support. It's just kind of,
mhm,
we're just going to pile on, but we're not
right,
going to give you anything softer to land on if you fall.
right. Yes, absolutely, and I should add that, when a physician leaves a practice, you'll typically get a letter from that practice saying, "Doctor so and so is no longer with the practice, but Doctor, you know, Doctor Smith will see you
Hmm.
in place of this other doctor," and that's typically to avoid what they call patient abandonment,
Correct. Yeah.
because you can't just up and leave and, move to another city or state or country for that matter, and leave your practice hanging.
Yeah.
So, it's different depending on what kind of group you're in, or what type of practice. But if you're in like a family practice or if you're
Yeah.
in OBGYN, where you actually have direct face to face contact with your physician and that physician is the only one that you see there, you will typically get a letter like that, which is really frustrating. We've been on the receiving end of that multiple times, and that's happened to me midway through a pregnancy. So
Yeah.
it's tough. So yeah,
These are the things that are kind of outside the periphery,
right.
but that impact us so deeply. And as the patients on the receiving end, I think it's so important that work like yours is out there letting us know how and why we need to address this. Not just, burnout is not personal, it's systemic.
Right.
And it goes beyond the physician's life and then their personal life and their families. So, Lisa, I wanted to also talk about your MedLife Matrix methodology and your course. Um, I would love to be able to provide some a framework or an understanding of how this methodology can help physicians' families understand or do things differently in ways that they're maybe because they're in the thick of it, they really can't see their way out of it or how to do things differently. So,
Yeah.
if you could tell us a little bit about your midlife matrix methodology and
Mhm.
also your course, the Mastering the Midlife Matrix.
Yes, absolutely. So when we talk about those factors that go into the physician burnout matrix, essentially, we have the organization, we have the physician, we have the spouse, and we have the patient. So if you picture a Venn diagram of all of those circles, or on my website, I think they're octagons, but they all come together
Hmm.
and they converge to create a thriving healthcare system.
Yeah.
So when all four of those components are in alignment, the healthcare system is thriving,
Yeah.
which is truly what we all want. The organization wants that, the patient wants that, the physician wants to work for an organization that's thriving, and the spouse wants the physician to be happy.
Yes.
So when all of those stars align, the healthcare system is thriving. So, my goal with my business, the MedLife Matrix, is to provide components that support all four of those quadrants, so to speak. And we mentioned how the organization is responsible for 80% of those factors. Well, I am seeking organizations to work with who are interested in changing their workplace culture and their physician well-being programs, and who are willing to take responsibility and accountability and make the change. When we look at those 20%, the physician and their family, they are the ones who are on the receiving end of the majority of this. So they are the ones that are willing to make the change.
Mm.
And so the course, Mastering the MedLife Matrix, is directed at physicians and their spouses, primarily the spouses, because we know the physicians are busy and they're probably not the ones that are going to take the time to do it.
Right.
But it's an 8-module course that is asynchronous, so you do it at your own pace and you work your way through it, and it provides um, modules of support, including applicable tools that you can use right now to help make your life the best that it can be, and how to manage the challenges that come along with midlife. And when all of those are working, then we know that the patient is experiencing
Yeah.
a benefit as well. So all four of those factors combined create the thriving healthcare system, and that is what we all want. And that's why it's important for, my neighbor next door,
Yeah.
that we don't have burnout physicians.
That's right. For
Mhm.
me, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah, for
mean,
me,
yep,
for my daughter, for my husband, for my,
yep.
parents, so this has been amazing. I mean, just our conversation today has actually opened up for me, and I'm sure for people listening, just a whole new world and a whole new
Mhm.
perspective about med life and the impact that med life and the experiences of their spouses actually have also on us as the patients.
Mhm.
And so if we as patients can do anything to support that, that would be wonderful. And if there are any resources or anything that you can provide to us, please do. And we will put them in the show notes to see if there are ways that we as patients, in that way, can advocate for ourselves. Because if you think about it that way, it's a way of advocating for ourselves by advocating for our physicians and our physician spouses and their families. We are
Mhm.
also trying to change the way that we are cared for, as well. So, Lisa, I wanted to ask you, for that person out there that has been listening, they hear
Mhm.
themselves. You have said so many salient things that absolutely have resonated with people. And I'm thinking about that person who is postponing their own stuff and their own desires, dreams, self care. They're just in the thick of it. Maybe they're in the stage of life where they are pregnant and moving, or maybe they have a little one and one on the way, or maybe, you know, they're in that space of being that project manager, of just working on being competent at managing what they need to do. But they're hearing this today and they're saying, oh my gosh, wait, this is what I've been feeling because we've articulated some things here. Your research has brought out some of those feelings that maybe they weren't aware of. Maybe they're not ready to do the course, but but they know they need something. What would be just
Mhm.
one gentle recommendation that you could give someone listening of where they could start?
Well, the first thing I would say is give yourself a little grace
Yeah.
because all of the things that you're feeling are valid, even if you're married to a doctor,
Hmm.
regardless. All those feelings of loneliness, the feelings of sacrifice and loss, and feeling like a single parent, those are valid.
Yeah.
So give yourself grace first. Find community. That is huge. Whether it's a virtual online community, whether it's a mom's group in your neighborhood, whether it's a county, state, or national medical alliance, build community around yourself so that you can feel supported because no one is going to understand better than people who are in the thick of it as well. And yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing too is focusing on your connection with your spouse and partner. That's huge. Taking just 5 minutes every day that you can have these micro moments of connection where each of you gets to say, something about your day.
Yeah.
And that is huge because connection is, you need that connection to support the relationship,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
that will get you through.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. I am so grateful that you gave your time, your generosity, sharing your work, and um, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to let people know where they can find you.
Absolutely.
So, for anyone who's interested in checking out Dr. Muehlenbein's work, you can go to various places. You can go to the website, first of all, which is themedlifematrix.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at the MedLife Matrix. And also, you can follow the podcast and listen to it, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. And this is something that I've said to you, and I will say to people. You also have the loveliest voice. So your podcast is just such a pleasure to listen to. It's so soothing, and all that yoga, your
Yeah.
yoga voice, right?
Thank you.
That you probably don't even realize that you have. Like it's wonderful to listen to. So I would say to everyone, please go head over to the podcast, the MedLife Support Podcast, and of course, if anyone wants to email, we have Dr. Lisa. That's Dr. Lisa at the medlifematrix.com.
Mhm.
Thank you again for being here. I'm so appreciative.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's truly my pleasure. And I appreciate you taking me actually from the very beginning to where we are right now. I haven't done that yet. And it is truly a foundation of how I got here. So thank you.
Wonderful. Oh, you know what? And I was almost going to forget my very last question that I always ask guests is because this is the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. How would you define, in its simplest of terms, how would you define emotional wealth?
Hmm. I think for me, emotional wealth is feeling balanced,
Mm,
that I'm not feeling like I'm giving more than I'm receiving, that I don't feel like I am crumbling under the weight of responsibilities, and that I feel supported in my relationships, whether it's friendships, whether it's my family or my spouse. I think those are what I would consider to be emotionally wealthy.
wow. That is amazing, beautiful. And there is nothing more that I could possibly add to
Mhm.
that. So thank you. And thank you all for listening once again to the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. If this episode gave you insight, clarity, or perspective that you needed today, or you know someone that might benefit from hearing it, please share it. And if you're enjoying the show, leave a review and tell us how you're doing. Tell us how you're feeling about it, because that's going to help these conversations spread. And until next time, I invite you to stay curious, stay connected, and stay emotionally wealthy. Thanks so much for being here. See you next time. Oh, hey, quick reminder for you that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always consult a qualified professional with any questions you might have.